Tycoon left his pregnant wife barefoot in the street. 3 years later, saw her with triplets at event. She smiled without realizing it. The kind of smile that blooms from a secret known only to the heart. She was pregnant, just a few weeks along, but enough for her to feel it. That invisible connection between mother and child already beginning to take shape. Across the kitchen, Minho sat at the table, shirt sleeves rolled up, tie hanging loose. He looked tired but content, watching her dance around the kitchen with quiet admiration. "You know," she said softly, placing a steaming bowl of ramen in front of him, "I never thought I could be this happy over noodles and swollen ankles." He laughed, pulling her onto his lap with gentle insistence. "And I never thought I'd love someone so much that I'd actually crave ramen at 7 in the morning." She rested her head against his chest, her smile fading into something deeper, a fragile kind of joy wrapped in fear. "Minho," she began hesitantly, "are you sure about this life? About us?" He kissed her hair and tightened his arms around her. "I'd give up the whole world for you." But his words trembled at the edges. She felt it, a flicker of doubt, something unspoken that neither of them dared name. Not yet. Minho was the heir to a massive business empire, the son of Korea's most ruthless and respected tycoon. His world was filled with galas, expectations, and bloodlines. Her world was simpler, quieter. She came from a family of tailors. Her mother ran a tiny fabric shop in Incheon, and her father had passed when she was just a girl. They had met by chance. He had come to her mother's shop, seeking a custom suit. He was used to being served. She was used to serving others. But that day, he had watched her thread a needle with steady hands, her brows furrowed in focus, and something about her unshakable calm had drawn him in. Their love grew in stolen hours and quiet corners, hidden from society, hidden even from his family. For 2 years, they had created a world of their own. And now, with the baby growing inside her, that world felt both fragile and eternal. As the days passed, Soo-jin began to prepare for a life with him. A home with soft blankets and tiny shoes lined up by the door. She decorated a small room with stars and moons, hand-painting each one herself. She spoke to the baby every morning and read poetry aloud every night. She dreamed of lullabies and first steps, of birthdays and bedtime kisses. But while she dreamed, Minho began to fade. He stopped answering her calls during the day. Meetings ran late. Dinners were missed. His touch became absent, distracted, as if his thoughts lived elsewhere. One night, as they sat together watching old films on the couch, she turned to him, eyes shining with a kind of quiet desperation. "What's wrong, Minho? You've been afar, distant." He hesitated. "Nothing's wrong. Work has just been heavy." She reached for his hand and placed it over her belly. "You promised me we'd be okay. You said you'd fight for us." "I did," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I meant it." But again that flickered doubt, fear, guilt, something she couldn't name. She didn't know that, behind the scenes, his mother had discovered everything. That Madame Kong had summoned him to her cold, towering penthouse office and laid down the law. "If you stay with that woman, I will cut you off. No inheritance, no company, no name. She is beneath us. That child is a stain." He had sat in silence, staring at the marble floor, feeling as though the air had been pulled from the room. All his life, he had been molded to succeed, to obey, to become the perfect heir. And now, his love for Soo-jin was being weighed against everything he'd ever been promised. Back in their apartment, Soo-jin folded tiny clothes, humming softly, unaware that their world was already crumbling. A few days later, he didn't come home. She called once, twice, 15 times, but no answer. Her texts went unread. The silence was deafening. Then one afternoon, she received a message. "We need to talk." Her hands trembled as she arrived at the designated place. Outside the headquarters of his family's company, a massive glass building that loomed over her like a god. She clutched her coat tighter, her belly beginning to show. Minho was already there, dressed in a dark suit, his expression unreadable. Min-ho, she said breathlessly, stepping toward him. What's going on? He looked at her with hollow eyes. I'm sorry, Sujin. This was a mistake. Her heart stopped. I can't marry you. I can't raise this child. What? Her voice broke. You deserve someone who can give you stability, a quiet life. I can't be that man. I never was. She reached out for him. Don't do this. Don't lie. If this is about your family, he pulled back. I've made my decision, and I need you to leave. She shook her head, tears spilling now. You said you loved me. You said, that was before I realized what I had to lose. In that moment, a gust of wind blew through the street, and her scarf flew from her shoulders. She ran to retrieve it and felt her shoe tear. The heel snapped. She stumbled, pregnant, barefoot, crying, in front of a dozen passers-by and business executives coming out for lunch. Min-ho turned his back. The camera clicked. A stranger watched in silence, capturing the image of a woman betrayed. Barefoot in the street, belly round, eyes wide with disbelief. And in that moment, Sujin knew. She was no longer someone's love. She was someone's shame. But as she stood there, trembling, she placed her hand over her belly once more. The baby kicked, strong, defiant, as if reminding her that she was not alone. And slowly, breath by breath, she stood tall again. She would not beg. She would not fall. He had abandoned her, but she would rise. And that was the beginning of everything. Você diz. Certo, agora a tu como narrador. Storyteller desenvolva a história sem marcos com o nome de cada tópico que for desenvolve. Me conte sobre o tópico tu com dialogo como su faço espectador. Sempre lembrando de desenvolver com muita emoco. Com muitos sentimentos de forma que a estrutura de narrativa utiliza uma linha temporal linear de modo o espectador sentir o que o personagem está sentindo amigos. Com 6.000 characters o chat GPT diz. The sharp scent of expensive perfume lingered in the air, mixing with the cold stillness of the Kong family estate. It was a palace perched above the city, all glass and steel, unforgiving in its elegance. Inside, the atmosphere was suffocating, as though every breath needed permission. Madame Kong sat at the head of the long lacquered dining table, her posture immaculate, her fingers wrapped around a porcelain teacup that had never once trembled. Her eyes, cold, sharp, and without mercy, scanned the morning paper with a practiced detachment. Min-ho stood in front of her, shoulders stiff, the collar of his tailored shirt tight around his neck. He hadn't slept the night before. His thoughts had been consumed by Sujin. The warmth of her touch, the sound of her laugh, the way she whispered to their unborn child. He had imagined a life with her, away from this world of control and calculation. But now, facing his mother, that dream began to dissolve. She folded the paper and placed it down with mechanical grace. I've received some news. He didn't respond. A woman, she said, slicing through the silence. From a tailor's family, pregnant with your child. He swallowed hard. Her name is Sujin. Madame Kong raised one perfect brow. I didn't ask her name. He clenched his fists at his sides, forcing his voice to remain steady. She's the woman I love. I plan to marry her. The teacup met its saucer with a quiet but deliberate clink. You will do no such thing. She's carrying my child, mother. A child born out of recklessness, she said, each word laced with venom. You are the heir to the Kong legacy. You were raised to lead, not to throw away everything for some girl from the gutter. Min-ho flinched, his breath catching. She's not from the gutter. She's kind, smart. She made me believe I could be more than just your puppet. Her gaze turned icy. You are not more than your blood, Min-ho. You were never raised to believe in fantasy. Everything you are, everything you will ever become, I built. He took a step forward, desperation swelling in his chest. She's not asking for anything. She doesn't care about the money, the name. She just wants our child to have a father. And if you give her that, Madame Kong interrupted, voice rising ever so slightly, You lose everything else: the company, the inheritance, the trust of every board member. No one will take a man seriously who can't even control who he impregnates. Her words cut like glass, slicing through what was left of his resolve. He had grown up in this house, a boy shaped by silence, rules, and rewards granted only when obedience was absolute. As a child, he had memorized stock reports before he could ride a bike. He had been taught to bow before he spoke. He had been told over and over that emotions were for the weak. And yet, Sujin had made him feel alive, had made him laugh, truly laugh, for the first time in years. With her, he had been a man, not a project. But now, his mother's voice was dragging him back under. "You have two choices," she said, standing and walking toward him with a measured grace that belied the cruelty behind it. "You cut ties with this girl, disappear from her life, or you walk away from your future." Minho looked away, jaw tight. "There must be another way." "There isn't." She placed a file on the table and slid it toward him. "This is your contract with the board. It stipulates moral conduct. Breach it and you're out. Permanently." Silence. Outside, the wind moved through the cherry trees lining the estate's entrance. Petals danced across the pavement like whispers of a life that might have been. Inside, Minho stared at the contract, his reflection faint in the glossy cover. His heart beat like a drum against his ribs. Every part of him wanted to scream, to fight, but his hands stayed still. He remembered the look in Sujin's eyes the night she told him about the baby. The soft flicker of hope, the vulnerability. She had trusted him. And now he was standing in a house that had never known love, being told to break her heart. He thought of their child. Would it have her smile? His eyes? Would it ask one day, "Where's Daddy?" And what would she say? His fingers hovered above the folder. A tremor ran through his hands. "I need time," he whispered. "You have 48 hours, Madame Kong said flatly. "Make the right decision." As she walked away, the sound of her heels clicking against the marble floor echoed like a final sentence. Minho stood alone, feeling as though the walls were closing in. That evening, he wandered through the city in a daze. The bright lights of Seoul blurred as he passed busy streets and laughing couples. He stopped in front of Sujin's apartment building and looked up at the window where a soft light glowed. He could see her shadow moving inside, pacing gently, probably talking to the baby, reading a story, maybe singing. He wanted so badly to run up those stairs, to fall on his knees and beg her to run away with him. But instead, he stood in the shadows. He hadn't noticed the tears on his face until the wind chilled his skin. He was losing everything, but it wasn't the company that terrified him. It was the thought of losing her. When he finally turned to leave, the street behind him felt darker. He walked as if sleepwalking, each step heavier than the last. The next day, back at the estate, he found Madame Kong waiting. "Well?" she asked. He looked her in the eye and lied. "It's done." "Good," she said, satisfaction creeping into her voice. "You've made the right choice." But in his chest, something cracked. Not loudly, not visibly, just a quiet fracture, like the first line in a porcelain vase. A wound no one could see. But every day that the door didn't open, every message that went unread, every night she fell asleep clutching a pillow instead of his arms, the truth seeped in a little deeper. He was gone. And not just physically. He had made a choice. And it wasn't her. Sitting in the small rocking chair near the window, she rested both hands on her belly. The tiny flutters inside were growing stronger. A gentle reminder that someone was still with her, still depending on her. She leaned her head back and closed her eyes, whispering into the quiet room. "Appa is just confused, baby. He'll come around. He has to." The words were meant for the child, but she needed to hear them too. That evening, when her phone finally rang, she jumped. Hope struck her chest like a thunderbolt. Her hands trembled as she reached for it. Minho's name glowed on the screen. Her breath hitched. She answered. Silence. Then his voice. Flat. Formal. "Let's meet." A pause. She swallowed. "Okay. Where?" He gave her an address. Cold, businesslike. Not their home, not the cafe they loved, not the park bench where he had once whispered forever into her hair. Outside the Kong Group tower, the next morning, she stood in front of the towering building, heart pounding, stomach tight, from nerves or the baby or both. She wore her best coat, but it was thin. She had no time, no money to buy new shoes, so she polished her old ones until they gleamed. When she saw him walking toward her, she smiled instinctively, but he didn't smile back. His face was unreadable. He stopped 2 steps away, didn't move closer. "You look tired," she said softly. He looked past her, as if unable to meet her eyes. "I wanted to talk to you in person. I think it's best we end this." The words hit her like a slap. "What?" "I'm not going to be a part of this child's life," he continued, his voice clipped, controlled. "It's better this way, for both of us." "No," her voice cracked. "No, Minho, you don't mean that. We love each other. You said you..." "I don't anymore." Silence. Car passed behind them. Someone laughed in the distance. Sujin's eyes filled with disbelief. "You're lying." He didn't answer. She stepped forward. "Please, just tell me the truth. If your family..." "I made my choice." He cut in, voice sharp now, colder than the wind biting her cheeks. "You don't belong in my world. I won't fight for you." Her heart broke slowly, not in one dramatic crack, but in a series of quiet, unbearable fractures. She reached out, desperate. "I'm carrying your child. Doesn't that matter to you?" For the briefest moment, his gaze flickered to her belly, and something passed through his eyes, regret, maybe, pain. But it vanished as quickly as it came. "I'll transfer some money to your account. Enough to manage." "No," she said fiercely, shaking her head, tears spilling now. "I don't want your money. I want you. We want you." He took a step back. "Don't make this harder than it is. You already made it impossible," she whispered. And then, it happened. The heel of her shoe caught on the curb as she stepped toward him. She stumbled forward, her balance off from the weight of the baby, and fell hard to the ground. The sound of her knees hitting the pavement echoed louder in her own ears than it really was. Her bag spilled. A tiny stuffed bear, the first toy she had bought for the baby, rolled into the gutter. She gasped, her hands on her belly, trying to breathe. Minho didn't move. He just stood there, watching. People began to look. Someone pulled out a phone. Sujin struggled to her feet. One shoe was torn. Her coat had ripped at the sleeve. She stood, barefoot now on one foot, humiliated, shivering, eyes brimming with fury and heartbreak. "You're a coward," she said, her voice low but trembling with rage. "You don't deserve to be called a father." Minho's lips parted, as if he wanted to say something, but the words never came. He turned and walked away. She watched him disappear into the building, swallowed by polished marble and privilege. The world blurred around her, but she didn't cry again. Not then. She bent slowly, picked up the stuffed bear, and cradled it to her chest. A man nearby approached her. "Miss, are you okay? Should I call someone?" "No," she said quietly, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm fine." She walked away, limping, heart shattered, pride in pieces. But she walked, because if Minho wouldn't fight for her and their child, she would. She would fight harder than she ever thought possible. That night, she sat alone on the floor of her tiny apartment. She had locked the bedroom door, pulled the blanket around her shoulders, and stared at the ceiling in the dark. All around her, silence. But then, a small kick. She gasped softly. Her hand flew to her belly. Another kick, then another. She burst into tears. Not from sadness, not entirely, but from awe. "You're still here," she whispered. "You're still fighting." And just like that, a piece of her shattered heart began to stitch itself back together. Not because Minho was gone, but because her child had stayed. They would make it. She stood outside the hospital, soaked to the bone, her thin coat clinging to her frame. Her lips were blue, her fingers numb. She had walked from home, nearly an hour. No taxi would stop. She didn't have the fare, and the pain in her legs had grown sharp. She pressed her palm to her belly. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're almost there." The hospital doors slid open. Warmth rushed out to meet her, but even inside, she shivered. Not just from the cold, but from the lingering echo of everything she had lost. At reception, the nurse looked up, frowning. "Miss, are you all right?" I need to see a doctor. I fell yesterday. I'm pregnant." They rushed her to a room. She was laid gently on a bed, the lights bright above her. A thin curtain pulled around her body. A fetal monitor was strapped around her stomach. The soft blip, blip, blip of the heartbeat filled the silence. She stared at the ceiling, arms folded tightly over her chest. She was shaking. The door creaked open. A middle-aged doctor stepped in, his face kind, voice calm. "Miss Han Soo-jin?" She nodded. "I reviewed your scans. The baby's okay." She exhaled sharply. Relief spread through her, warm and immediate. "Actually," he said, looking at the screen again, "babies." She blinked. "Excuse me?" He turned the monitor so she could see. 3 small heartbeats pulsed on the screen. Tiny, perfect, unmistakable. "You're having triplets." The world tilted. She sat up too fast. Her hands flew to her mouth. No, that's not triplets." He smiled softly. "It's rare, but it happens naturally sometimes. They're all measuring healthy. You're strong. You've taken good care of them." Tears filled her eyes again. But this time, they were something else. A storm of disbelief, fear, awe. Three tiny lives. 3 pieces of him. And now all of them hers to raise alone. As the doctor left, a nurse helped her change into dry hospital clothes. Her hands trembled as she folded her wet things. The nurse paused, then gently asked, "Is there someone I can call for you?" Soo-jin forced a smile. "No, just me." The nurse didn't pry, but before she left, she placed a small cup of warm tea by Soo-jin's bedside. That simple kindness almost undid her. Later that afternoon, she was discharged. They handed her an envelope, her test results, prescriptions, and a long list of warnings. "Take it easy, avoid stress, rest as much as possible." She nodded, but her heart sank. Rest was a luxury she could no longer afford. Outside, the rain had turned to mist, but the air was still bitter. Her shoes were still wet. One of them had torn at the sole, exposing her skin to the pavement. She walked slowly, her arms around her belly. As she passed a row of shops, she paused before the display of a baby boutique. Inside were 3 tiny mannequins in matching bear-themed pajamas. She stood there for a long time, then something inside her snapped. Not in anger, but in resolve. No one was coming to save her. Not him, not his family, not fate. She would have to do it herself. And she would. Soo-jin turned toward the bus stop and reached for her phone. There was only one contact she dared to call. The line rang. "Yobaseo?" Came a voice, warm and familiar. "Halmoni." Her voice cracked. "Child? Oh, my dear, is that you? You sound tired." "I'm sorry. I didn't know who else." "Come," the woman said, not needing to hear more. "You and the babies. You'll come to me." And so she did. Madam Park wasn't her real grandmother, but the nickname had stuck since childhood. She had been a friend of Soo-jin's mother and owned a tiny, crumbling hanok house at the edge of the city. When Soo-jin arrived, drenched and shivering, Halmoni didn't ask a single question. She wrapped her in a blanket and sat her down by the heater. She made rice porridge and seaweed soup. She placed a hand on her belly and whispered prayers the way only the old know how to do. That night, Soo-jin cried into the blankets, muffling the sound so the old woman wouldn't hear. But Halmoni heard. The next morning, she handed her a small box. Inside were buttons, threads, needles, fabric swatches. "You have hands," Halmoni said gently, "and you have fire. That's all a woman ever needed to survive." "But I don't know how to raise 3 children alone," Soo-jin whispered. "You'll learn," the old woman said. Like we all did, one heartbreak at a time. And just like that, the next chapter of her life began. Not with grand gestures. Sujin sat at the low table, her legs tucked beneath her as she threaded a needle with shaking hands. Her belly was full now, round, unmistakably heavy, and every movement had to be slow, careful. The doctor's warnings still echoed in her ears. Stress can trigger early labor, Miss Han. But how could she avoid stress when every minute felt like a countdown? Halmoni shuffled in with a hot towel. "Put this on your back," she said. "You're sitting too long again." Sujin smiled faintly. "I have to finish this order by tomorrow. It's a wedding hanbok. They paid in advance." "Your health comes first," Halmoni said, lowering herself with effort beside her. "What good is money if your babies come too soon?" Sujin didn't answer. She just pressed the towel against her lower back and kept working. Each stitch was deliberate, and her eyes stung from the concentration. The hanbok was beautiful, deep burgundy and navy, embroidered with golden thread. The bride had requested chrysanthemums on the collar, a symbol of endurance. Endurance. She had learned that word intimately. Every day began before the sun and ended long after the stars rose. Between sewing orders, she cleaned, cooked, and walked carefully to the nearby markets for rice and dried fish. She rationed her food, eating little but ensuring the babies had enough. She memorized lullabies she had never heard as a child. She wrote their names over and over in her journal, even though she hadn't decided what to call them yet. She never said it aloud, but she knew. She was afraid, not of the birth, but of being forgotten, discarded, that somewhere out there, Minho had already moved on. Maybe he was with another woman. Maybe he hadn't thought of her since the day he turned away. Maybe their children would never know their father's name. She never spoke of him, not to Halmoni, not to herself. But sometimes, just sometimes, she woke up gasping, hand pressed over her heart, his voice still echoing in her dreams. "You don't belong in my world." The pain didn't come all at once. It started with a sharp jolt one afternoon while she was picking herbs in the yard. She gasped and dropped the basket, grabbing the edge of the wooden railing as her knees buckled. Halmoni rushed out. "What is it?" "Something's wrong," she whispered, panic tightening her throat. "It hurts." By the time they reached the hospital, Sujin was already dilated. Too early. The nurses spoke in rushed tones. Machines beeped urgently. Her vision blurred from the pain. "They're coming now," the doctor said. "We can't stop it." "No," she gasped, gripping the rails of the bed. "It's too soon. I'm not ready. Please, they're not ready." "You need to breathe," the nurse said, pressing a damp cloth to her forehead. "Breathe for them, okay?" Sujin screamed, not just from the pain but from the fear, the unbearable terror of losing what she had fought so hard to protect. And then, just like that, a cry pierced the air. Then another, and another. 3 voices, shrill and tiny, but alive. Tears poured down her cheeks. She reached out, but they were gone too quickly. Taken to the neonatal unit, tiny and fragile, fighting for their own breath. Later, in the dim quiet of the recovery room, a nurse came in holding a single photograph. "We're keeping them in incubators for now," she said gently. "But they're strong. Fighters. Just like their mother." Sujin stared at the photo. 3 tiny bundles. Eyes shut, mouths open. So small she could barely believe they had come from her. She traced their faces with a fingertip. Her lips trembled. "I'll never leave you," she whispered. "Never." The nurse placed a soft cloth beside her. "You should rest now." But she didn't sleep. She lay there all night, watching the snow fall through the hospital window, a photograph pressed to her chest like a vow. 3 lives, 1 heart, her heart. And then one morning, a nurse called her name gently, like it was a secret. "They're stable enough today," she said, smiling through her mask. "You can hold them now." Sujin's legs nearly gave out. Her hands trembled as she washed, sanitized, put on the sterile gown. When she stepped into the room, the scent of disinfectant made her dizzy. Machines beeped softly, rhythmic and persistent, like little mechanical lullabies. There they were, so small, so perfect, each of them tucked inside a tiny clear box, their skin translucent, their heads no larger than her palm. "Come here," the nurse guided her gently. "This one, he's the biggest. We'll start with him." She sat in the chair. The nurse lifted the tiny bundle carefully, wires still connected, and laid him in her arms. The moment his skin touched hers, Sujin broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound. She didn't want to scare him. She rocked ever so slightly, breath catching in her throat as she whispered, "Hi! Hello, my baby!" He stirred, his mouth puckering in protest, and then he stilled again, pressing his cheek against her chest. "He knows you," the nurse whispered. Sujin nodded. "He should. I've been talking to him every night through the glass." "Do they have names yet?" She bit her lip. "Not yet. I was afraid of naming them too soon." "Yes." The nurse placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can name them now. They're strong. Just like you." That night, back in her hospital bed, Sujin sat with her journal open. The page had been blank for weeks. Now she picked up her pen. She wrote 3 names. Not names of beauty or elegance, but names of survival. Names that meant light, hope, and truth. Because that's what they were now. Her light, her hope, her truth. They were discharged a month later. Still tiny, but breathing on their own, eating, crying, living. The hospital staff cried when she left. Some gave her blankets. Others handed her diapers, formula, even little socks. She didn't ask for anything, but kindness found her anyway. Halmoni was waiting in the snow when the cab pulled up to the house. She waddled out with her arms open. "Let me see my little warriors." Sujin laughed through her exhaustion. "Halmoni, slow down. You'll fall. I've survived 3 wars. Let me hold my great-grandbabies." Inside, the house was warmer than she remembered. She had feared it would feel too small for 4 hearts, but it didn't. Somehow it felt like home. She fed them one at a time, propped up on cushions. She sang lullabies with cracked lips and a hoarse voice. She bathed them with boiled water, holding their necks with careful fingers. And she worked. Every moment they slept, she stitched. Word spread slowly, the girl with the triplets, the one who made bridal dresses with hands like angels. Women came to her doorstep, offering tea and stories and coins in envelopes. One of them returned a week later, bringing her sister. Another brought her friend. By spring, she had more orders than she could handle. She didn't hire anyone. She couldn't afford to yet, but she saved. Every one, every cent. She kept a small tin in the kitchen cupboard, labeled Future. And when she fed her babies, she told them stories about strength and kindness. About how they came into the world too early but stayed anyway. "Do you know?" she whispered one night, rocking one of them while the others slept beside her. "Your father used to say I didn't belong in his world." She paused. Her voice trembled, but she didn't cry. "And he was right. I don't belong in his world." She smiled through the sadness. "I'm building my own. A world of fabric and lullabies, of tiny fists and warm bottles, of fight and grace and pride." And she never mentioned his name again. Not even when she saw his face on a billboard a year later, advertising his newest business expansion. Not even when she passed one of his stores, and a woman stepped out in a fur coat with a child that wasn't hers. Not even when her sons began to look more and more like him every day. The cherry blossoms still bloomed across Seoul, but to Min Ho, they had lost their magic. They floated down like soft reminders of something he could no longer touch. He stood at the top floor of Kong Group's new headquarters, floor-to-ceiling windows stretching over the city like a kingdom. From up here, everything looked perfect, sleek, controlled. The empire he was trained to inherit was now fully in his hands. He had succeeded, and he felt nothing. "Sir," his assistant's voice interrupted. "Board meeting starts in 10. He nodded, turning away from the window. His reflection followed him. Tailored, polished, unreadable. But beneath the surface, a man haunted. He walked into the boardroom, sat at the head of the long table, and presented numbers, projections, growth percentages. His voice was steady, confident. No one questioned him. After the meeting, he returned to his office. As always, Cora was already waiting, sitting on his couch, legs crossed, flipping through her phone. "You missed the gala last night," she said without looking up. "I had work," he replied, loosening his tie. "You always have work." She finally looked at him. Her eyes were sharp, but tired. "You know," she said, rising, "there's a limit to how long I'll pretend we're actually a couple." He didn't respond. She walked up to him, placing her perfectly manicured hands on his chest. "We make sense, Minho. We're from the same world. People expect us to be together. The press loves it. Your mother loves it." He flinched slightly at the mention of his mother. "But I don't want to marry someone who's in love with a ghost," she whispered, stepping back. He froze. Cora stared at him, her voice quieter now. "She still lives in your eyes, you know? That girl. The one you left." "She's not." His voice failed. "She's gone." Cora tilted her head. "If she was gone, you wouldn't keep walking past her old apartment. I saw you." He looked away. "I don't care what she meant to you, Minho, but whatever you're trying to bury, it's not working." With that, she grabbed her bag and walked out. He sat down, resting his elbows on the desk, head in his hands. He thought he'd buried Sujin. Thought that with time, the shame, the guilt, the weight of his decision would dissolve into routine. But she lived inside everything. In the silence between meetings, in the sound of children laughing in the streets below, in the face of every woman he passed who held a child too tightly, as if the world might try to steal it. He hadn't heard her voice in 3 years, but sometimes at night, he still dreamt of it. "Don't do this. Don't lie." He had lied, and he had kept lying. To her, to himself. One evening, as he sat at his desk with the city's lights blinking below, his assistant knocked and entered without waiting. "Sir, I thought you should see this," she said, handing him a magazine. He frowned. It wasn't business-related. The front cover showed a group of local women holding handmade crafts, standing proudly behind a table. At the center of the image, holding a child in each arm, was a woman in a pale pink hanbok. Her eyes were bright, her smile small but sure. His heart stopped. It was her, Sujin, older, stronger, and not alone. There were 3 boys, one holding her hand, 2 in her arms. Identical, bright-eyed, their faces, He dropped the magazine. Where was this taken?" His voice was hoarse. The assistant blinked. "A community fair in Mapo district. It was featured on a segment about single mothers building small businesses." He stood suddenly. "Get me the video." Within minutes, the screen in his office lit up. He watched in silence as the reporter interviewed Sujin. She wore a simple dress. Her hair was tied back. She spoke with calm determination. "We started from nothing. My sewing machine was borrowed. I sold my first baby blanket for the price of a bus ticket." The reporter asked about the children. "They are my miracle," she said, looking down at them. "Born early. All of them. We fought through every night together." Minho's throat tightened. "And their father?" the reporter asked gently. Sujin hesitated. Then, with a small, almost invisible smile, she said, "He gave me the greatest gift. I've raised them to be proud of who they are. And that's enough." Minho turned the screen off. The room was dead quiet. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She was alive. She had survived. She had become someone so radiant. It hurt to look at her. And the boys, his sons, he covered his mouth with a trembling hand. A knock at the door. "Sir," his assistant said, "you have a speaking event tomorrow at the National Foundation benefit. Should I prepare your notes?" He stared out the window again. Then something shifted in his eyes. A decision. "Add a donation to the Han Community Project," he said. "Under my name." "Of course. And the event." He stared at his reflection. His tailored suit, his calm expression, the perfect image of the Kong Group CEO. But beneath it, chaos. His eyes drifted to the photograph tucked behind the mirror's edge. It wasn't supposed to be there, but he'd placed it there last night. The magazine cover, her face, and there's 3 small boys with his eyes and her strength. He hadn't slept. He had memorized every detail of that photograph. The way her hand rested protectively on the smallest boy's shoulder. The quiet way she looked at the camera. Not with fear, not with bitterness, with resolve. He hadn't been ready then. He hadn't been brave. But now he was going to see her again. Downstairs, the car was waiting. As he stepped in, his driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "To the benefit hall, sir?" "Yes." The car pulled into traffic. The city was alive, buzzing with the rhythm of ordinary people living real lives. He wondered what Sujin was doing right now. Packing lunches? Dressing the boys? Sewing before they woke up? He clenched his fists. 3 years without a word. What right did he have to show up now? But he had to see her. He had to know. The benefit hall was elegant and massive. Crystal chandeliers, white linens, media walls flashing logos. People moved like water around him, some offering. Polite bows, others eager handshakes. But he didn't hear any of it. He scanned the crowd once, twice. She wasn't there. "Mr. Kong," someone said behind him. He turned. One of the coordinators smiled nervously. "The women from the Han Community Project have arrived. Would you like to greet them?" His chest tightened. "Yes." He followed the woman across the room, his heart hammering in his ears. Around a small table were displays of handmade toys, small purses, and baby clothes. A few mothers stood behind the table, chatting softly. Children clung to their legs. And then there she was, Sujin, standing at the far end of the booth, arranging a line of embroidered bibs. Her hair was loosely tied, a few strands falling around her face. She wore a soft cream blouse, modest but beautiful. Her eyes were focused, unaware. She looked exactly the same and completely different. He stopped walking. He couldn't move. The world narrowed to just her. And then, as if sensing him, she looked up. Their eyes met, and everything inside him collapsed. She froze, just for a second. Her hand faltered slightly on the fabric. But she didn't show anything else. No gasp, no anger, no fear, only silence. He took a tentative step forward. "Sujin?" She blinked slowly, then lowered her gaze and turned back to her work. "Good morning, Mr. Kong." Her voice was cool, formal. He flinched at the title. You don't have to call me that." "I think I do," she said, placing a folded cloth onto the table. "This is a professional event, isn't it?" He searched her face. "I wasn't sure you'd be here." "Why wouldn't I be? I was invited. I saw the article. The photo," he said quietly. "I didn't know." She looked at him again, sharp now. "You didn't know because you never looked." He swallowed hard. "I wanted to. No," she interrupted softly but firmly. "You wanted to forget. You made that very clear." A boy ran up beside her. Tiny, breathless, with a bandage on his knee and a juice box in his hand. "Yama." He pushed me again. Another boy followed behind him, holding a toy dinosaur by the tail. "I didn't." He fell. And then a third toddled up slowly, rubbing his eyes. She crouched down immediately, wrapping her arms around all 3 of them. "My little army," she whispered, pressing kisses to their heads. "Are you okay?" They nodded in unison, pointing fingers at each other and babbling their explanations. Minho stood frozen, his breath caught in his throat. They were right in front of him, his sons. He couldn't speak, couldn't blink, couldn't move. Sujin rose to her feet slowly. She met his gaze once more. "You left me barefoot in the street," she said. Her voice wasn't bitter, it was calm. Too calm. "Do you remember that?" His voice cracked. "Yes. I begged you," she continued. "I told you I was pregnant. I asked you to choose us. And you looked me in the eye and walked away. I thought I was protecting you," he said weakly. "Don't insult me with that," she said, her voice low now. "You weren't protecting me. You were protecting your name." your status, your pride. He had no defense, only regret. I've thought about what I'd say to you if this moment ever came, she continued, eyes steady. Some days I imagined screaming, other days I imagined I'd cry. But now that you're here, she looked down at her boys, so full of life, so loud, so real. I don't need to say anything else. He stepped closer, eyes wet. Can I talk to them? She paused. Then, after a long moment, she knelt down and gently turned the boys toward him. Boys, she said, this is someone I used to know. The oldest tilted his head. Is he our uncle? No, she said quietly, her voice steady. But he gave you something very important. What? The youngest asked, yawning. She glanced up at Min-ho, then back to them. Your eyes, she whispered. He had always prepared for negotiations, for boardrooms, for wars of strategy and silence. But nothing could have prepared him for this moment. The way she'd looked at him, not with hate, not with longing, but with finality. The boys so full of her spirit, so unaware of who he truly was to them, that he had once chosen power over them. He moved through the benefit hall like a ghost, shaking hands when necessary, offering polite nods. But his mind was trapped in a loop. She turned them toward me. She let them see me. And then she walked away. When the event ended, he didn't go home. He drove aimlessly for hours, down back roads, past blinking traffic lights, until the city lights gave way to quiet neighborhoods and hills. He stopped outside her district without even thinking. His car idled quietly under the soft orange hue of a street lamp. Across the street was a modest building, paint peeling from the edges, flower pots lining the windowsill. Lights still glowed behind the curtains. He saw silhouettes moving, 3 small ones darting around, and one tall, calm, guiding them with steady hands. He gripped the steering wheel, torn between impulse and guilt. But then the front door opened. Soo-jin stepped outside onto the porch with a basket of laundry, her hair loosely tied back, her shoulders slightly hunched with exhaustion. She hadn't seen him. She hung the laundry one piece at a time, small shirts, soft pants, tiny socks. Her movements were slow, deliberate, like someone used to doing everything alone. One of the boys poked his head out the door. Yama, I'm thirsty. She smiled gently. Go ask Halmoni. She made barley tea. He ran back inside. Min-ho couldn't take it anymore. He opened the door of his car and stepped into the street. The gravel crunched beneath his shoes. Soo-jin turned at the sound. Her eyes widened when she saw him, but she didn't speak. He stopped halfway across the street, heart pounding in his ears. I'm not here to take anything, he said quickly. I couldn't leave it like that. She didn't move. You already did. 3 years ago. I know, he breathed. I've replayed that moment 1,000 times. The way I left you, the way you fell, the way I said nothing. I see it every night. She stayed silent, arms crossed tightly over her chest. I was weak, he continued, his voice cracking. I told myself I was choosing survival, that if I lost everything, I'd have nothing to give you. But the truth is, I was afraid of what loving you would cost me. She blinked slowly, but still said nothing. I thought I could forget, build the life my mother wanted, become the man the world expected. But the truth is, Soo-jin, I've been empty ever since. His voice broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a second chance. I needed you to know that I see it now. Everything I threw away, and I would give up every cent, every title, just to undo that day. A long silence followed. She finally spoke, her voice quiet. Undoing that day wouldn't erase the nights I cried alone. The days I stitched clothes with blistered fingers just to buy diapers. The hours I watched them sleep, wondering if I was enough. Tears filled her eyes, but she held them back. You left me barefoot in the street, Min-ho, and they were already inside me. I know, he whispered. I don't say that to hurt you. I say it because it's the truth. And truth is all I've had to hold on to. He stepped closer, one cautious foot in front of the other. "Let me help now," he said, voice shaking. "Not because I want redemption, but because I owe them. And I owe you. I can support you quietly. Whatever you need. Money, a better house, school funds, anything." She looked at him, her voice barely a breath. "And what if they ask who you are?" He hesitated. "I'll say, I'm someone who left when he was a coward, but who came back when he learned what love actually meant." That shook her. She lowered her gaze, gripping the laundry basket tighter. Her shoulders rose and fell with slow, tense breaths. Then, a small voice from the doorway, "Iyama, who is that man?" They both turned. The oldest boy stood in his pajamas, eyes wide, head tilted. Sujin froze. Minho dropped to his knees right there on the sidewalk. "My name is Minho," he said gently. "And I used to know your mother." The boy looked at him, curious. "Do you have children too?" He swallowed. "Yes, I do." "Where are they?" He glanced at Sujin, then back to the boy. "I think I'm looking at them right now." The child blinked, confused but not scared. He took one small step forward, then another. Behind him, his brothers peeked out. Sujin closed her eyes. The breeze picked up, carrying the scent of early spring. Soft earth, night flowers, something like hope. And for the first time in years, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was the sight of Minho, kneeling before her children like a man who had drowned in silence and was now begging the world to let him breathe again. It rattled her in a place she'd spent years building walls around. Her son looked between her and Minho. "Iyama, why is he kneeling?" She couldn't answer, because she didn't know how to explain to a child what it meant when someone came back too late but still chose to come back. Minho's voice, low and shaking, filled the space. "Because I made a mistake. The biggest one of my life." The child tilted his head. "Did you break something?" Minho smiled faintly. "Yes, I broke something very important." There was a pause. The smallest twin, quiet and shy, stepped out from behind the doorframe, still sucking on his thumb. He stared at Minho with those soft, curious eyes. Eyes that mirrored his. Minho's breath hitched. They were his. It was no longer a theory or a fear or a wish. He could see it now. In the curve of their cheeks, in the slight arch of their eyebrows, in the stubborn set of their tiny jaws. And suddenly, he wasn't thinking about stock options or board meetings or legacies. He was thinking about what it meant to miss a child's first word, a first step, a scraped knee that he wasn't there to bandage. Sujin finally spoke, her voice tight. "It's late, boys. Back inside now." The eldest hesitated. "But Iyama, I want to know." She softened. "I know, baby, but it's bedtime. Say goodnight." The boys looked at Minho. The middle one raised a hand awkwardly. "Good night, Ajushi." Then they vanished inside, the door closing behind them with a soft click. Sujin and Minho were alone again. Under the porch light, the night stretching wide between them. She exhaled slowly, setting the laundry basket down. Her voice came quieter now. "You said you wanted to help." He nodded. "Anything. You can't just throw money at this." "I know." "Then what do you mean?" "I want to be present. Not to claim anything, not to take. Just to try. If there's any room left in their lives for me." Her eyes flashed. "Room in their lives? What about the nights I held all three of them through fevers? The time I had to choose between formula and paying rent? The winter I sewed clothes with my hands bleeding because I couldn't afford gloves? I know I wasn't there," he whispered. "I see it now. Every time I look at you, I see what I missed. And I hate myself for it." Her expression trembled just slightly, but she caught it, steadied it. "You made your choice, Minho. I made mine. I chose to keep living. And I chose to stop," he said. "The moment I walked away from you, nothing felt real again." She looked at him for a long time, so long that the wind started to shift, brushing through her hair. "You came back because you saw a photo," she said. "Not because you felt something in your soul, but because the world reminded you I existed." He stepped closer, but not too close. "No, The photo only showed me what I already knew deep down but couldn't face. That I lost the only thing that ever made me human. She blinked, and the wall cracked again. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he continued. I'm asking for a chance to do one thing right, even if you never let me in again. Even if I stay on the edges. Let me take them to school one day. Let me fix the leaking faucet. Let me watch their school play. Not as a father, not yet. Just as someone who cares. Deeply. You can't step in and out when it's convenient, she warned. They'll grow to know you. They'll start asking questions. And I won't let them be disappointed. Not even once. Then don't let me disappoint them, he said. Hold me to the promise I never had the courage to make. Sujin looked down at the porch, at the tiny socks still clinging to the line. Her heart was pounding. Not from hope, from terror, because part of her wanted to believe him, and that was the most dangerous thing of all. She walked toward the door slowly, then turned. If you want to prove it, she said, voice low. Be here tomorrow, 6 in the morning. Help me carry them to daycare. That's the start. I'll be here, he whispered without hesitation. She stared at him, then closed the door. Behind it, she pressed her back to the wood and sank to the floor, her hand over her mouth, eyes flooding. Because no matter how much she had tried to erase him, Sujin was already awake, tying her hair up while balancing one twin on her hip and gently nudging the other with her foot as he fought her attempts to get his socks on. Come on, baby, she murmured. We're going to be late. The third one had already thrown a tantrum over which sweater he wanted to wear and now sat sulking by the door, arms crossed like a little emperor. It was just another morning, chaos wrapped in love. But this time there was something else in the air. Tension. A question. Would he come? She didn't let herself hope. She told herself not to wait, not to look, but she did. Every time she turned toward the front window, every time she heard the faintest sound outside, she looked, and then she saw it. A silhouette, a tall figure approaching the door. Minho, dressed in a simple gray hoodie and dark jeans, carrying a thermos in one hand and a small bag of pastries in the other. He knocked once, then again softer. She opened the door before he could knock a third time. Their eyes met. You came, she said quietly. I said I would, he replied, voice equally soft. He glanced inside. The three boys were already staring at him, one peeking from behind the couch, another clinging to his blanket, the third holding a crayon like a sword. Sujin stepped aside. Come in, but don't expect them to like you right away. I don't, he said, stepping inside carefully. I didn't bring bribes. He held up the bag. Just breakfast. The boys eyed the bag with suspicious interest. Say good morning, she said to them gently. A beat, then a timid, collective murmur. Good morning. Minho crouched down slowly, placing the thermos and pastries on the table. I'm not very good at mornings, he admitted, but I'm good at carrying things. Can I help with your bags? The boys exchanged glances. Finally, the oldest one pointed to his backpack. It's heavy, Minho smiled. I've carried worse. Let me try. And just like that, something shifted. Sujin watched from the kitchen, arms folded across her chest, biting the inside of her cheek. Minho knelt and gently adjusted the child's straps, then looked up. You packed all this yourself? The boy nodded proudly. That's impressive. You must be the leader. He grinned. The other two slowly gathered around, cautiously curious now. By the time they were all zipped up and ready, Minho had successfully earned a smile from one, a high five from another, and a half nod from the most skeptical. They headed out into the early morning light. The walk to the daycare was short, 10 minutes, maybe. But for Minho, every step was a revelation. The way the boys talked over each other, trying to tell the same story. The way they tugged at Sujin's sleeves. How she answered every question with patience. Even the ones she had surely heard 100 times before. How tired she looked, but how much love radiated from her even in that exhaustion. And how much he had missed. Outside the daycare gates, the boys hesitated. Will you come back tomorrow? The middle one asked. Minho knelt. Only if your mom says it's okay. They turned to her, 3 pairs of eyes blinking expectantly. She sighed. We'll see. They groaned but accepted it, running inside as their teacher greeted them. Now it was just the 2 of them again. Sujin turned to leave, but Minho walked beside her. You don't have to walk me back, she said. I want to. They didn't speak for a few moments. The sound of morning life was beginning to rise, scooters, shopkeepers opening their stalls, birds claiming the new day. Finally, Minho broke the silence. They're incredible. I know. I don't deserve them. No, she said flatly. You don't. He winced. But they're not here to punish you. I won't raise them to carry my pain. Her voice softened, just barely. They're not revenge, Minho. They're freedom. He nodded. I want to learn how to be part of that, even if it takes the rest of my life. She stopped walking, looked at him fully. You say that now, but being a father isn't a weekend role. They'll have questions. They'll want answers. Real ones. I'll tell them the truth, he said. Even the shameful parts. Then start with me, she whispered. Tell me the truth. He looked away, then back. There was no shield in his eyes now. I didn't walk away because I didn't love you. I walked away because I was too afraid of what that love would cost me in the world I came from. And when I lost you, I realized that love was the only thing worth keeping. A silence settled between them, heavy and healing. Come again tomorrow, she said quietly. Then she turned. And this time, just presence. He helped pack the lunches, though he couldn't cut the kimbap rolls evenly. He helped button small jackets, even if the twins squirmed away every time. He waited outside the daycare during his lunch breaks, just to catch a glimpse of them laughing on the playground. And slowly, so slowly, the walls began to move. One morning, the middle child ran into his arms without thinking. Another day, the youngest called him Samchin instead of Ajushi, and then giggled at his own mistake. Sujin watched all of it from the sidelines. Her arms always folded, her heart always guarded, until the day the envelope came. She found it in the mailbox tucked between advertisements and bills. Thick paper, expensive ink, her name handwritten, no return address. She knew what it was before she even opened it. Inside, an invitation to the Kong Group's annual foundation gala. She stared at the embossed lettering, her fingers trembling. Later that night, Minho stood awkwardly in her small kitchen as she stirred soup on the stove. Why didn't you tell me? She asked without turning. Tell you what? She turned slowly, holding up the envelope. He exhaled. I wasn't sure you'd go. I didn't want to pressure you. I'm not interested in being a charity case, she said sharply. It's not that. He stepped closer. They want to honor the Han project. Your project. She blinked. What? He nodded. Someone submitted your story, your sewing work, the women you've helped, the children you support. It made it through the board. They want to recognize it. Publicly. She stared at the letter. You submitted it. I didn't, he said, then added gently. But I would have. Silence stretched between them. Do you want me to go? She asked. He hesitated. I want you to be seen, for who you are, for everything you built. You don't owe them anything, but they owe you. And your mother? Will she be there? He swallowed hard. Yes. Her voice dropped. You think I want to stand in front of the woman who told you to throw me away? I think you deserve to show her you were never something to throw away. That night, she didn't answer him. But 2 days later, she stepped out of her bedroom in a navy dress she'd made herself. Simple, elegant, her hair pinned back, her posture tall. Minho stood waiting in the living room, stunned, speechless. You're really going, he said softly. I'm not going for you, she replied, reaching for her coat. I'm going for them. The gala was grander than she remembered. Crystal chandeliers, velvet drapes, wine glasses clinking. She walked in on Minho's arm, not clinging, just steady, like she belonged there all along. Eyes turned, whispers began. At the far end of the room, Madame Kong froze mid-conversation. Her eyes narrowed, lips tightening. Minho met her gaze with quiet defiance. He offered her no introduction, no warning. He simply guided Sujin to the table reserved for honorees. When the time came, a host stepped on stage and called her name. She hesitated. Minho touched her hand. "You don't have to say anything." She stood anyway and walked. The room quieted. On stage, she looked out at the polished faces. So many of them had once judged her, dismissed her. "I was told once," she began, voice clear, "that I didn't belong in this world, that I was a stain, that I was small." The room shifted, murmurs hushed. "But I've learned something since then, that worth is not defined by wealth, that a mother's hands can build an empire, one stitch at a time, and that love, real love, does not abandon. It creates a beat." I accept this recognition not because I was rescued or redeemed, but because I survived. And I stand here for every woman who was told she wasn't enough. Applause broke out, some hesitant, some stunned, some fierce. Minho stood too. His eyes never left her. Madame Kong did not clap, but she didn't look away either. After the ceremony, Sujin stepped down from the stage. She was calm, glowing, but just before she reached Minho, she stopped. Madame Kong stood blocking the path. They stared at each other in silence. Then Madame Kong said, flatly, "You're not what I expected." Sujin smiled gently, but her eyes stayed hard. "Neither were you." And she walked past her like a queen, straight into the life that had once been denied to her. Not by stealing it, not by begging for it, but by owning it. Beside her, Minho watched in awe. For the first time, he realized. But for Minho, the night was still unraveling. He sat beside Sujin in the back seat of the car, his hands resting stiffly on his knees, unsure if he had the right to reach for hers. She hadn't spoken since they left. Her gaze remained outside the window, watching the city rush past in a blur of lights and shadows. He finally broke the quiet. "You were extraordinary." She didn't look at him. "I wasn't trying to be. You didn't have to. You just are." Her reflection shifted slightly in the glass, but she said nothing. He leaned back, exhaling. "When you stood there, speaking to that room, I realized how small my world has always been. How narrow. You chose that world," she said simply. "I know," he murmured, "and I lived inside it like a coward." The car turned down her street. Familiar now, warm, human, not gilded like the life he had left behind that night. As the driver parked, Sujin reached for the handle. But before she opened the door, Minho found his voice again. "Sujin." She paused. "Can I ask you something?" She didn't respond, but she waited. If I had stayed back then, if I had fought for you, do you think we would have made it?" She turned toward him, her expression unreadable, but her eyes were tired. "We would have made it through the hard days," she said, "because I was already ready to fight, but you weren't, and that's what broke us." He lowered his head. Her voice softened. "I don't live in the past anymore, Minho. I can't. I'm too busy surviving the present and building the future." He met her gaze again, quiet. "Do I get to be part of that future?" She searched his face. There was no anger in hers, no resentment, but there was caution, a tremble behind her strength. "I don't know," she whispered. Then the door opened, and the night air wrapped around them again. She stepped out and he followed. The boys were already asleep, sprawled across blankets on the floor, little limbs tangled together like puppies. Sujin kissed each forehead as she removed their shoes and tucked them in gently. Minho watched from the doorway, his throat tight. He had missed this, not just birthdays or holidays. He had missed the ordinary miracles, the way their chests rose and fell, the faint sound of their breathing, the scent of childhood. When she finished, she rose and walked to the kitchen. He followed. She poured 2 cups of barley tea and handed him one without a word. They sat at the small table, knees brushing beneath it, neither of them moving away. After a long silence, he whispered, "There's something else I have to tell you." She looked up, wary. He swallowed. My mother's stepping down. Her eyebrows rose. She made the announcement to the board privately, he continued. She won't return next quarter. She's retiring. On her terms, of course. But she's leaving. And the company? Sujin asked cautiously. I'll run it, he said. But differently. She leaned back slightly, arms crossed. Differently how? I've already begun restructuring. Community investments, family grants, supporting women entrepreneurs like you. He paused, eyes searching hers. Not to fix what I did, but to make sure no one else gets left out in the cold. She studied him in silence. Finally, she said, What made her leave? He hesitated. I told her that I was done living her life, that I had something more valuable to protect now. Sujin's eyes flickered. You said that? She asked, her voice barely audible. I did, he nodded, because I meant it. A wave of silence passed between them, but this time it was gentle. Then she asked, And what is it, Minho? What's more valuable than everything she built? He looked straight into her eyes. You. Her breath caught. He placed his cup down slowly. Not just you. All four of you. That home. That mess. That laughter. That's everything I never knew I needed. She looked away, blinking rapidly. I don't want to rush you, he said, or force anything, but I just want you to know. I'm staying. As long as it takes. The clock ticked softly in the background. One of the boys stirred in his sleep. Sujin finally looked back at him. Her voice came out quiet, fragile. Then stay. Pause. But this time, don't disappear when it gets hard. He reached across the table, slow, careful. She didn't stop him. Their fingers met, and in the quiet of their small kitchen, no gala, no lights, no audience, something finally began to heal. He arrived early to walk the boys to daycare, sometimes with mismatched socks himself. He helped wash the dishes at night, even if he broke a cup or two. He read bedtime stories with too many voices and sang lullabies off-key. He was awkward at first. The twins laughed at his inability to braid hair on their stuffed bunny. The oldest corrected his pronunciation when he tried to recite their poems. But he didn't flinch. He let them laugh. He let them guide him. And in doing so, they began to claim him. Slowly, like children testing water with their toes before jumping in. One rainy afternoon, they built a cardboard rocket ship together in the living room. The youngest crawled in, declaring, We're flying to the moon, Appa. The room froze. The word hung in the air like thunder. Minho looked at Sujin. Her breath caught. Her eyes filled. But she didn't say anything. Neither did he. He just climbed into the cardboard ship and said, Then let's fly. That night, after the children were asleep, she sat beside him on the porch steps, rain falling in soft sheets beyond the awning. I didn't tell him to say that, she said. I know. They sat in silence for a while, the scent of wet earth curling around them. I was terrified the first time I held them, she whispered. I didn't even know how to hold one, and suddenly there were three. He turned to her. I'm terrified every time I touch them. She let out a soft laugh, broken and warm. Then she grew quiet again. There's something I haven't told you, she said, her fingers curling in her lap. Something you deserve to know. He turned fully toward her now. What is it? She hesitated, then inhaled deeply. About a year after they were born, one of them, June, got sick. A high fever, seizures. They couldn't bring it down. Minho's chest tightened. What happened? We rushed him to the hospital. They said it was an infection, aggressive. He needed a blood transfusion. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't blink. I didn't have a match. Neither did Halmoni. He swallowed. What did you do? I remembered a clinic, she said slowly. The one near your old office. I took a chance. I told them his father's name. I begged them to check the records, just in case you'd ever donated blood there. Minho's breath caught. They found a match, she continued. It was you. It saved his life. He closed his eyes, overwhelmed. I wanted to call you. I had your number written down so many times. But I couldn't do it, she said, voice trembling now. I hated you too much and loved you too much at the same time. He opened his eyes, looked straight at her. You shouldn't have had to do that alone. You left me no choice, she whispered. But I did what I had to do. He nodded, shame burning behind his eyes. I don't deserve their love. Or yours. She studied him, and for once, she didn't answer quickly. Then she said, No, you don't. A long pause. But love doesn't come from worth, she added gently. It comes from presence, from choice. And you're here now. I will be. Always. Her eyes dropped to the floor. That scares me more than when you left. He reached out, his hand hovering over hers before touching it. I'm not asking you to trust my words, he said. Just my actions. The rain eased. A breeze swept through the porch. From the room inside, a child whimpered in sleep. Sujin stood slowly, but she didn't let go of his hand. You should come inside, she said. It's late. Minho followed her in. He'd entered this place many times in the last few weeks, but tonight, something was different. The way she had let him in without resistance, without a sigh, meant something had shifted. The living room was quiet, toys neatly put away. The only sound was the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional rustle of blankets from the boys' shared room. Sujin turned on the hallway light, her back to him, her voice barely above a whisper. You can sleep on the couch tonight if you want. He froze for a moment. She turned toward him, arms crossed lightly. You said you wanted to stay. I'm giving you the chance. But not as a lover. Not yet. As a father. That's the door you asked to open. He nodded slowly. Thank you. She handed him a folded blanket and a pillow. They wake up early. June asks about dinosaurs before his eyes are even open. He smiled, taking the blanket. I'll be ready. She nodded, lingered for a second, then walked down the hall and gently closed her bedroom door. Minho stood there, blanket in hand, heart hammering. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was hope. He lay down on the couch, staring at the ceiling for a long while. Sleep didn't come easily. Every creak of the floorboards made him flinch. Every cough from the children's room sent him halfway to his feet. And then, just past 3 a.m., a soft cry pierced the quiet. He bolted upright. Another cry followed. Not loud, but broken, tired. A child's dream turning sour. He stood, unsure for a second. Then he walked quickly to the boys' room. He knocked once, gently. No answer. He pushed the door open. Moonlight spilled across the floor through a half-open curtain. The smallest of the boys was curled tightly into himself, fists balled up, tears streaking his cheeks. Minho knelt beside him. Hey, buddy, he whispered. It's okay. I'm here. The boy whimpered. Iyama? She's sleeping, Minho said gently. Do you want me to get her? The child shook his head, wiping his nose on the sleeve of his pajama shirt. I had a dream, he said, voice cracking. I was looking for someone, but no one could see me. Minho's heart clenched. You were just lost in the dream, he said. But you're not lost here. The boy sat up, eyes wide. Can I stay with you? Minho hesitated only a second. Then he scooped the child into his arms and carried him back to the couch. He wrapped them both in the blanket and held him close, heart racing. The boy nestled in like he'd done it 100 times. Within minutes, he was asleep again. Minho didn't move. He watched the rise and fall of his son's breathing, counted each little sigh, and in that silence he wept. Not loudly, not desperately, but with quiet, stunned gratitude. Morning came gently. Soft light filtered through the curtains, and the first sound he heard was the padding of small feet. The twins stood by the edge of the couch, blinking. One of them yawned. Why is he here? The other grinned. Did you sleep here, Appa? He froze. The word again, this time with no hesitation. He sat up slowly, still holding their brother. Yeah, he had a bad dream, so I stayed. One of them clambered up beside him, while the other darted into the kitchen, yelling, Iyama! Appa's here. Minho braced himself. Sujin appeared a moment later, hair messy, eyes tired, but her expression unreadable. She stared at the scene. 3 boys tangled in blankets. Her former husband holding their youngest like he'd been doing it for years. He stood slowly, gently placing the child back on the couch. He had a nightmare. I didn't want to wake you. She said nothing at first. Then, in a voice that didn't shake, she said, "You did well." He looked at her, stunned. His voice cracked. "Thank you." She nodded. "I'll make some tea." He followed her into the kitchen, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. She reached for 2 mugs. "You're not the man I knew. I know. You're not trying to fix everything with money anymore." "I don't want to fix," he said quietly. "I just want to be here." She placed the mugs down and looked at him. Truly looked. "I see it," she said, softer now. "You changed." He didn't breathe. "But I'm still afraid," she added. "I'll carry that fear," he whispered, "for as long as it takes." Outside, the city woke. But inside that kitchen, where so many nights had ended in silence, a new day was beginning. He learned to braid stuffed animals' ears when the boys demanded it. He cleaned messes without complaint. He carried all 3 of them to bed on nights when their energy finally crashed mid-story. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, the rhythm of the house changed. There was a 4th toothbrush in the holder now, a folded blanket always waiting on the couch, extra chopsticks at dinner without anyone needing to ask. One evening, as they all sat around the dinner table, soy-glazed chicken, rice, and miso soup filling the room with warmth, the oldest boy looked up mid-bite and asked innocently, "Appa, are you going to live here forever?" Minho paused, his chopsticks mid-air. Sujin, across the table, went still. Her eyes met his. He looked at his son. "Why do you ask?" The boy shrugged. "Because you don't leave like before. You come back. I like when you come back." His twin chimed in. "Me too." The youngest nodded slowly, mouth full of rice. "You make my nightmares go away." Minho's chest tightened. Sujin stood abruptly and began clearing dishes. "Okay, time for teeth brushing." "But we're not done," they cried. "You are now." The boys groaned but obeyed. As they filed out of the kitchen, Minho stood and helped carry bowls to the sink. When the last child was gone, he turned to her. "I didn't tell them to say any of that." "I know," she said, her back still to him. He took a breath. "But they're starting to expect me to stay. I can see it. And I won't lie to them." She turned slowly, her hands still wet from the sink. Her eyes were guarded. "I haven't asked you to leave," she said. "But I also haven't asked you to stay." He stepped closer. "I don't want to hover in this in-between anymore, Sujin." She stared at him, then looked away. "There's a school event," she said after a moment. "Tomorrow, Parent Participation Day. The boys have been talking about it for a week." He nodded slowly. "I'll go, of course." She wiped her hands and leaned back against the counter, arms crossing again. "There's more," she said. "The teacher asked if we'd both be there, as their parents." I didn't correct her. "Do you want me to correct her?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she whispered, "They call you Appa now." "I know. And they mean it." "I know that too." Her voice cracked. "Do you?" He took a step closer, heart pounding. "Yes," he said. "I do." She looked at him fully now, eyes brimming but unbroken. "You don't just get to be their father when it's easy. You missed the blood, the panic, the loneliness. You weren't there when I screamed into the floor because I didn't know how to stretch one meal into 4 mouths." "I know," he said, "and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. I protected them from the truth," she whispered. "But someday they'll ask. They'll want the whole story." "I'll tell them," he said, "exactly what happened. No excuses, just the truth." She looked away again, as if holding her breath. "I don't know how to let you all the way back in," she whispered. "I'm afraid if I do and you leave again." "I won't," he said without hesitation. "Even if you never love me again, I'll stay, as their father, as a man who finally knows what it means to show up." She turned away, hiding her face as her hands gripped the counter. Her shoulders trembled, but she didn't speak. He waited, then gently placed a hand on her back. Not pressing, just there. "I'm not asking for your heart right now," he said. "Just your trust. Just one more chance." The silence between them was no longer sharp. It softened, like dusk melting into night. After a long beat, she whispered, "Be there at 8. Don't be late." He smiled faintly. "I'll bring snacks." She exhaled, then laughed once. Short, shaky. "Only if they're not store-bought." "I'll cook." She turned toward him, finally. Her eyes still wet, but her lips curved. "Then we'll see." Minho was already there when the boys woke up. He stood at the stove in an apron several sizes too small. One of Sujin's, with tiny embroidered strawberries. Fumbling with a pan of homemade pancakes that were slightly lopsided but smelled perfect. The boys ran to him immediately, crowding around, cheering. "Are those for us? Did you cook, Appa? Did you flip them? With fire?" Sujin leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching the scene. He turned to her as the boys devoured their food, cheeks puffed like chipmunks. "I didn't burn anything," he whispered, "but I came close." She smirked. "You forgot the salt, didn't you?" "A little," he admitted, "but I doubled the honey." They shared a brief glance. Not playful, not romantic, just quietly proud. Later, in the schoolyard, the energy was buzzing. Parents lined up with their children, all in matching class t-shirts. Paper flags fluttered in the breeze, and squeals of laughter filled the space. Minho held the boys' hands, adjusting their little caps, while Sujin signed them in. One of the teachers came over, beaming. "Oh, the twins' dad finally made it. We've heard so much about you." Minho froze for a second. Then he smiled. "It's good to finally be here." The events began: obstacle courses, mini relays, drawing corners. Parents cheering, camera phones flashing. Minho ran like his life depended on it during the sack race. He tripped twice, landed in the grass, laughed so hard his eyes watered, and the boys laughed harder. He lost to an 8-year-old girl. He didn't care. During the art activity, the children were asked to draw their families. June drew a house with 4 windows. Inside, for stick figures. One was taller, the other had long hair, and the 2 smallest stood between them, holding both hands. Minho stared at it, stunned. Sujin leaned in. "He used to draw just the 3 of us," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. After the final event, the teachers asked the parents to sit while the children performed a short thank you song. Dozens of little voices sang off-key and wildly out of sync, and it was perfect. At the end, each child handed their parent a small envelope with a note inside. Minho looked down at his. June had written it. It read, "Thank you for finding us." He couldn't breathe for a moment. That night, after the boys were asleep, worn out from running and laughter and too much candy, Minho helped Sujin pick up the mess of paper crafts and crumpled napkins in the living room. She folded a towel and glanced at him. "You looked ridiculous during the relay." "I was trying to impress my kids," he said, grinning. "Clearly, I failed." "They were impressed," she said softly. "So was I." He looked up. Her eyes met his. There was a hesitation between them, the kind that comes before something vulnerable, something real. "I used to imagine this," he said, voice low. "Not the races or the flags. Just coming home with you, helping clean up. The little things." Her expression softened. "You could have had it sooner." "I know," he said, "but I was too blind to see what mattered." She placed the towel down, folding it with slow hands. "Minho," she said quietly, "I need to know something." He straightened. "Anything. If it gets hard again. If your world demands you choose between us and them, what happens next time?" "There won't be a next time," he said. "How can you be sure?" He stepped closer, heart pounding. "Because this," he gestured toward the house, the drawings on the fridge, the scattered shoes by the door, "is the only world I want now." She didn't answer right away. Then she asked, "And me?" He froze. You say you want the boys, she said. That's clear. But what about me, Minho? Do you want me? Or just what I represent? He looked at her for a long time. Then he stepped even closer. I want you, he said. Not as an apology. Not as a chapter I'm rewriting. I want the woman who stitched an empire from pain. The woman who raised 3 hearts while hers was breaking. The woman who stood on a stage and made the world listen. Her breath caught. I loved you then, he whispered. But I didn't deserve you. I love you now, and I'm ready to earn it. She stood frozen, her eyes glassy. Say it again, she whispered. He did. I love you. She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just closed the space between them, slowly, carefully, and laid her forehead against his chest. And in that moment, they weren't ex-lovers, or broken parents, or people trying to piece together a ruined past. There was no rush, no frantic dressing or lost socks or cereal spilled across the floor. Everything moved slowly, softly, like the world itself had decided to pause, just long enough for something delicate to take root. Sujin woke to the sound of quiet voices in the kitchen. She sat up, brushing her hair out of her face, and listened. Don't burn it this time, Appa. I'm not burning it. I'm caramelizing. That's not a real word. Yes, it is. Is not. Is too. She smiled and climbed out of bed, pulling her robe tighter. In the kitchen, Minho stood in a chaos of pancakes, banana slices, and flour handprints across his shirt. The boys sat on stools at the counter, watching him with all the intensity of scientists studying an experiment. He looked up and saw her. Good morning, he said with a lopsided grin. I've made questionable pancakes. They're better today, June announced. Less weird. Progress, Minho muttered. She leaned against the doorframe, her eyes soft. It smells like a sugar bomb in here. I read kids need energy, he replied. So I added more honey. She walked toward them, took one bite from a pancake, and nodded. Still needs salt. The boys laughed. Minho watched her for a long moment. The way she moved, the ease in her smile, the way she wiped syrup from the twins' faces like she'd done it 1,000 times. After breakfast, the boys ran to their room, chasing each other with paper airplanes. Sujin started cleaning the counter, but Minho gently took the dish from her hands. You do everything, he said. Let me. She didn't fight him. She stood at the sink, watching him work, hands resting on the edge of the counter. After a moment, she said, Do you ever think about what we might have been if none of this had happened? He stopped, slowly turned toward her. All the time, he said. She nodded, looking down at the water pooling in the sink. Sometimes I think about the life I wanted, the one where we lived in a small house with chip tiles and 1 baby, not 3. The one where we fought about silly things like laundry, not betrayal. He stepped closer. We still have chip tiles. She laughed quietly. True. He gently took her hand. We can't erase what happened, he said. But we can build something new, not as a replacement, as a continuation. She looked up at him. Even if we're still carrying the pieces? Especially because of that. A knock at the door startled them both. The boys peeked out of their room. Someone's here. Minho wiped his hands and opened the door. Madame Kong stood on the other side. Everything froze. She wore her usual muted gray coat, her posture rigid, her eyes unreadable. But this time, there was no driver behind her, no entourage, just her. Sujin stepped into view slowly, shoulders squaring. Madame Kong, she said. Minho didn't speak. His jaw tightened. His mother's eyes flicked between them. Then she looked past them, into the small living room, the worn couch, the 3 children now clinging to the doorframe. Her expression flickered. Something, not quite regret, but not pride either. I came to speak to you, she said, addressing Sujin directly. Sujin crossed her arms. I'm listening. Madame Kong glanced at Minho, then back again. I underestimated you. That's generous, Sujin said, voice cold. I judged you, she continued, because you didn't come from our world. because you weren't like us, but you built something from nothing. And my son," she looked at him now, "has become someone I barely recognize." Minho stiffened. "I mean that in the best way," she added. The silence between them was heavy. "I won't apologize for the past," Madame Kong said, "but I'm not here to threaten or shame you. I'm here because I'd like to meet my grandsons. If you'll let me." Sujin stared at her, then looked at Minho. He said nothing, only watched her, waiting. She took a slow breath. "You'll be introduced as a guest," she said, "not as someone who gets to rewrite what happened. You earn your place here like anyone else." Madame Kong nodded. "I understand." She looked at the boys, who blinked curiously from behind the hallway wall. "I brought them books," she said, lifting a small bag. "I wasn't sure what they liked. I heard dinosaurs." The twins stepped forward cautiously. The oldest took the bag, looked inside, and grinned. "Can we read them, Iyama?" Sujin nodded. "Just for a little while." They ran to the couch. Madame Kong followed, slowly, almost unsure of herself. Minho stood beside Sujin, watching her. "You didn't have to let her in," he said softly. "I didn't do it for her," she replied. "I did it for them." He nodded, voice low. "And for you." She turned to him. "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'm learning." And as she watched her children hand their grandmother a picture book, she realized something deeper. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from silence, but from something deeper. A shift, a letting go. Sujin stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing the last of the teacups from the visit. Her hands moved slowly, her eyes far away. Minho approached behind her, drying a plate. "You were brave today." She didn't look up. "I wasn't brave. I was careful." He set the plate down. "You were both." Paused. "I never imagined that day would come," she murmured. "Your mother in this house, on that couch, speaking kindly." "She didn't come to win," he said. "She came to see." "I'm not sure if that's better or worse." He smiled faintly. "It's honest." Sujin finally turned to face him. Her eyes shimmered, not with tears, but something close. A weight she'd carried for too long, slowly slipping from her shoulders. "She still frightens me," she admitted. "Not because of who she is, but because of what she took from me when you listened to her." Minho lowered his gaze. "I can't change that," he whispered. "But I can be different now." She stepped forward. "You are different now." He met her eyes, and for the first time in years, there was no hesitation in her gaze. "Come with me," she said suddenly. He blinked. "Where?" She walked past him, wiping her hands on a towel. "Just follow me." They moved through the dim hallway, past the boys' bedroom where soft breaths and tiny dreams floated in the dark. She opened the door to her room, no longer locked to him, and stepped inside. Minho followed, cautious. She crossed to her dresser and pulled open the top drawer. From beneath folded scarves and a faded baby sock, she retrieved a thin envelope, yellowed at the edges. She handed it to him. He took it carefully. "What is this?" "A letter," she said. "I wrote it 3 years ago, the day you left me on the street." He swallowed hard. "I never sent it," she continued. "Never showed it to anyone. But I never threw it away either." He looked down at it. Her handwriting across the front. "For Minho, if he ever remembers." His hands trembled slightly as he opened it. The first line hit him like a punch to the chest. "You broke me in a way I never believed I could survive." He looked up at her, but she just nodded. "Keep reading." He did. "You walked away from me when I needed you most. I begged with my eyes, with my silence, with the life growing inside me. But you didn't see me." His throat tightened. "I don't hate you even now. I wish I did. I wish I could forget the way you once made me laugh at nothing, or how your hands used to warm mine without a word. But I remember, and it hurts. God, it hurts." He pressed a hand to his mouth. "If you ever find your way back to this letter, it means you came back for us. I don't know if I'll ever forgive you. I don't know if you'll deserve it. But I hope you're different. I hope you understand now." The final line undid him. If you've truly changed, if you love me still, come home with more than words. Come home with hands ready to hold, with arms ready to carry, with a heart brave enough to stay. He looked up. Sujin stood there, arms crossed tightly over her chest, eyes swimming but proud. I never knew if you'd read it, she said. Minho stepped toward her slowly, with reverence. I'm sorry, he whispered, for every second you lived with that pain alone. She nodded, barely. You don't have to apologize anymore. I need to, he said, not because I think it fixes it, but because it reminds me never to forget what I almost lost. He folded the letter carefully and held it against his heart. I came home, Sujin, he said, not to ask for love, but to offer it, fully, unconditionally, without fear. She stared at him, trembling. Then, finally, she whispered, I know. The silence between them bloomed. He reached for her hand, and this time, she let him take it. He pulled her gently into his arms, and for the first time in 3 years, she didn't resist. There was no rush, no dramatic music, just the quiet sound of two hearts learning how to beat in rhythm again. In that embrace, everything that had once shattered slowly began to fuse. And somewhere down the hallway, one of the boys stirred in his sleep and murmured, Appa. The sound melted through the house like light. They stayed like that, holding, breathing, healing, as dawn began to stretch softly across the horizon. Not the